Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for a very special video, or live stream that me and Alex have realized we seem to do around every 6 months. So here we are. It's been about 6 months. We are back once again, joined by Alex Barker, Euro expert from The Athletic. Thank you very much, Alex, for coming back on. We'll talk a lot about what we're going to be talking about in a minute. First of all, well, I hope you've been well. It's great to see you. You were one of those people that were slightly more optimistic on Chelsea than a lot of other people were past last summer. Although you did kind of call exactly what happened in the last month or so. You're like, well, at some point in the season, they'll probably start to struggle breaking down low blocks. So, Alex, except that you were terribly wrong on your Man City PSG call yesterday, how does it feel knowing everything that's going to happen?
That was very well snuck in. Well done, my friend. Yeah, it's felt good because I had a bet with a friend who, get this, he was so heated on Chelsea's summer transfer window business that he accepted that if they got top four, he would post a public apology on why he's so wrong about football. And if Chelsea didn't get top four this season, I would have to suffer nothing. Just how confident he was. They were an utter mess and would flounder this season. But quickly on being back on here, Laurenz, I mean, I when we were chatting backstage, remind me of the fact that I see if anyone else can remember. I think I was on your first ever watch-along stream, or one of them, back in Tuchel's first game of Wolves. Look how far we've come.
That was also my last watch-along since, because that was the most miserable day ever. I chose my first watch-along. I chose it to be the most boring 0-0 in history of football. And I was like, I'm not doing that again. It's just me talking about absolutely nothing. See, I could have done it when Chelsea beat Wolves like 6-2. Would have had a great time. But no, I had to pick the 0-0.
It would have changed the history of your channel.
Probably. But hey, here we are. I mean, like I say, it's great to have you back on. And of course, the pressing news that we have on the day is about Alejandro Garnacho, because Chelsea have decided to do, in my opinion, slightly weird things again, where we're just prioritizing the wrong bits. It's interesting what you were talking about, how you had that bet with your mate. And I was like, the funniest thing I could still see coming, be grateful that you didn't agree to the opposite bet type thing, because I still wouldn't be totally shocked if we end up finishing fifth, but fifth gets Champions League, so everybody's relatively happy anyway. But, we'll see how that goes, I suppose. But yeah, Chelsea and prioritizing the wrong areas. And I don't know your mate, and I don't know exactly what his qualms with Chelsea were. But that, even going back to the summer transfer window now, I mean, pretty much everybody we've signed, other than Jadon Sancho, it's not... Flop is maybe harsh, but, it's not particularly worked out well. And 4 of those, God knows how many we signed, are linked to moves away. Whether they will happen or not, different question. But if you're linked to a move away after 6 months, the first 6 months probably didn't go that well. So, yeah, we'll just have to start on it, I think. Let's go with Alejandro Garnacho. But on top of other signings. So maybe we'll go into detail on him as a player after. But when you heard that rumor in the last few days, what did you make of that? Before I even maybe add my thoughts to it, but what does an outsider think when Chelsea are like, yeah, let's sign another winger for £60 million?
I mean, I didn't actually bat an eyelid, to be honest. I think that's because, to be fair, I mean, at work, I'm very privy now to what our Chelsea writers are saying. So I was kind of aware, pretty early on, they were going for a winger. I think they wrote about it a couple of weeks ago. Simultaneously, Manchester United, right, have had this really big financial squeeze, and said they were considering selling Mainu and Garnacho. And I think Manchester United, they're in their 22-23 Chelsea spell, which they're not enjoying at the moment. So it actually didn't surprise me when I first saw you guys were interested, and yeah, I honestly kind of made a bit of sense to me, if anything. This is what Chelsea have been doing, seeing really high potential young players and gone, we'll snap them up. That's our recruitment model, and we'll just take them in. So yeah, actually I wasn't too surprised.
That's interesting. I mean, honestly, I'm not too surprised that you're not too surprised, because I feel like you said, from an outsider, this is kind of seems like the thing Chelsea do nowadays. Whether it always is the right decision or not is maybe a different topic. But obviously, I mean, you'll be well aware, Alex, but just to, clarify it for everybody listening, obviously, we have had 4 wingers, but unfortunately, one of them got himself doping banned. And even though we haven't had full confirmation of that B sample, the fact that Chelsea are lining up bids for another left winger makes me very confident that Chelsea do know the result of this B sample and are expecting a hefty and a long ban. Whether that ends up getting reduced in the end, like, for example, Paul Pogba's was or not, is a different story. But presumably, the initial ban will be about 4 years. So from that perspective, I guess you're like, okay, we could do with another winger. But my problem with it, Alex, and you can then elaborate why you slightly disagree with that, is for me, Jadon Sancho has been the only winger at the club that has had a good season. Now, I'm not saying he's been out of this world, but he's had a good season. And he is our left winger. And he, even though for now we don't even officially own him, but we have a loan with obligation to buy for only £25 million. And I'm like, Garnacho is not going to be, in my opinion, better than Sancho. So by that logic, you are now going to buy someone for 60 million to be back up to someone who costs 25 million. I just like, and I know you're obviously paying for potential. Obviously, that's how it goes when you sign players as young as Garnacho. But our dramatic need for a striker, our dramatic need for a midfielder, if we're unwilling to recall the ones that we own already, and in my opinion, even despite recalling Trevor Chalobah, to an extent, still an kind of desperate need for a centre back. And I'm not even talking about the goalkeeper situation because we won't do anything about it, even though we all know we should. And then also we are letting other players go. We're not replacing them. Renato Veiga, again, we'll touch on it a little bit later. But that's where I'm like, it's less so that I think Garnacho is a bad player. I think he is a bit expensive. And I'm like, we have other priorities that we should be focusing on right now. Did you understand that? Or do you think Garnacho is maybe a bigger talent than maybe I give him credit for?
I mean, we're going to talk about Garnacho in a bit, right? I think the squad building thing is fair. I mean, for me, whenever I look at Chelsea, goalkeeper is the biggest issue, but that does just seem like a situation where they're just living with it. You've got Jorgensen and has had promising performances, and you don't want to sign another goalkeeper because it could probably, it'll be like, what was the point in signing Jorgensen? And I imagine like Sanchez.
Have you heard of Mike Penders, bro? Do you know who he is?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes. You've got
I think that's what all our stocks are. I don't think anybody thinks Sanchez or Jorgensen are going to do anything ever, but they might be here for 3 years until Mike Penders turns up. I don't know.
I thought from what I've seen, I felt Jorgensen had done quite well. Have I missed him have some bad games?
Well, not really. The last game we played wasn't great, even though he kept a clean sheet, but that was when we played Morecambe in the FA Cup, but he was kind of terrible, but somehow got bailed out of certain situations. And otherwise, no, he's done all right, to be fair. When he played Conference League in that one league game he played, I can't remember which league game it was. He wasn't exactly at fault. To be fair, he did give that penalty away. The question is, was it a penalty? Remember Ipswich? Did he foul Liam Delap? Did he not? If he did, well, that's kind of on him. If he didn't, well, that's on the ref, I suppose. And the problem is the only other big game that he got that wasn't Conference League was Newcastle in a cup away. And it was also pretty terrible in that. But obviously, it's kind of difficult when you're like given 2 or 3 big games and we're all judging you on that. But because we're like, well, you're playing Conference League, so we're expecting you to not have a problem. So it's a difficult situation for him to be in. But the bigger issue seems that the manager isn't even doesn't even have a doubt in his mind about changing the number 1 goalkeeper. So it's kind of irrelevant anyway, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. I guess the other positions like centre back. I think for centre back and striker, it's like, well, strikers. I think one where it's just from like in my opinion, I reckon it would be like you sell Nkunku and then you use those funds to bring another striker in because, like, obviously Chelsea, can't spend all the money. They need to sell something, and that seemed to be the case, right? Trading Nkunku for Mathys Tel. So I imagine that's a situation there, and then. Like centre back, I mean, I did get transfer marked up because the drama in your voice about how Chelsea squad is so thin at the moment. I was like, is this so thin? I guess a centre back you kind of are with Tosin and Chalobah are called. Yeah, I've got Mamadou Sarr coming in the summer. We'll talk about him in a bit. But again, like I guess it's potentially enough like to last a season. Just how long Badia Sheila actually, rather than me looking at it on my phone.
It's. Again, unclear. Chelsea unclear. Now, certain people made it sound like he would be back relatively soon, but whenever Maresca is asked about it, he doesn't seem too convinced. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's more the quality of it, because Fofana, who knows? And also, even when he is back, how long can you actually expect him to be fit for? So you're kind of looking at Kobo, Chalobah, and Tosin, really, because everybody else is either nowhere near good enough or injured very often. And then you obviously have the whole Josh Achimpong situation. You've got 2 starters at the back. First one went very well. Second one, a little bit less so. And then next one, he's now not brought off the bench, but Disasi is instead again. And you're like, what was the whole starting him 2 games in a row about then? If now
you got Anselmino as well, right?
Say that again, sorry.
So you've got Anselmino as well, right?
Anselmino as well, who has actually, returned to Chelsea from his loan, that it was officially now. But we're not really sure what's going to happen. We know he's not going to be playing in this... there's some sort of under-20 something going on soon, isn't there? I mean, you might know this better than I do.
Oh, an under-20 World Cup?
Maybe some international under-20s tournament is happening, and he's not going to play there, which is interesting because I'm like, well, you're not playing him here. You're not sending him to Boca Juniors, and you're not sending him to the under-20s thing. So I don't really understand. It's so difficult for me, and maybe to share my perspective a bit more on that, Alex, is that I think a lot of Chelsea fans would probably agree with that. And obviously, guys in the chat, you can agree or disagree if you want. I think a lot of people's opinion is we sign the large majority of these players, whether it's Mamadou Sarr that you just touched on, or whether it's certain other players that we're linked with. We don't sign them to actually want them here. We sign them to make profit in a very short space of time. That's what it feels like. So there's some players that we sign, and I'm not even bothered in really finding out are they good or not, because I'm like, it doesn't really matter. The more I get attached to these players, the more I'll be annoyed when they get sold in 6 months or 12 months. And that's kind of where I'm like, I'm these, whether it's Anselmino, whether it's Mamadou Sarr, whether it's, I don't know, these types of players, it's like the doubts I have whether they'll ever play for the first team, let alone in the Premier League, is so large because the players ahead of them aren't 27, 28-year-old players. And you're like, okay, if these guys develop by the time they're ready articles, the other players will be kind of on the way out because they're kind of hitting past their peak and whatever. But no, our starting centre-backs are 21 themselves. So when is a 19-year-old centre-back going to be coming in? Now, sure, Anselmino might just be better than Colwell. Of course, there's that chance. But I have no idea. There's no judging that from playing for Boca Juniors, realistically.
Yes.
To have a full judgment, is he better than Colwell? You probably need to see him in the Prem to make a full, fair judgment call on that, I feel like when for someone so young. Did you get where that doubt maybe comes from for Chelsea?
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I did think of proposing you a question there, which is, a danger of derailing us. But so I don't disagree with what you're saying. The frustration is that you feel Chelsea are signing a lot of players at the moment, and like you said, what's the point of getting attached to them because they may never play for the first team. They will just go out on loan, and it will just be to make profit in the future, right?
Yeah.
Were you that annoyed when they did it under Abramovich?
To an extent, no, of course, and I know where you're coming from. But the thing that feels a bit different, and that's why I think people are a little bit critical at the moment, is that it feels like we're not signing players to be somewhat used for us, but they're sold to us as, yeah, he will be the guy in the future. When we signed certain players back in the day under Roman Abramovich, no one was ever under the illusion that they would ever play for the club because we didn't chase this dream of having this young team. No, we had John Terry and Cesc Fabregas and Eden Hazard in his peak. We weren't going for 21-year-olds starting every game for us. But now that's a thing. So now in a way, those young players could theoretically aren't completely out of the question. But they don't sell it as that. They're like, yeah, he could be the next guy. And then we're going to loan these 3 out to Strasbourg. And then we're going to figure out where else we can loan out all the other players to. Because we're going to buy more sister clubs. They've been trying to buy a club in Portugal for a while. They've been trying to buy a club in Belgium for a while. There's going to be more coming. And there's going to be more loans happening. So we can't fill all these clubs with all our players if we don't have enough players. So that's why I'm like, will they be here? I get your counter question in terms of Roman Abramovich, but it didn't feel like they were sold as soon. It felt like they were bought and then sold in 2 or 3 years after you've increased their value with loans. While at Chelsea, it feels like we're signing them. For example, with Renato Veiga at the moment. We signed him, a random bargain from Basel, who no one had ever heard of, realistically, even though I know he played for Augsburg and stuff. And now he's on his way out again after 6 months. Now he's only a straight loan. Juventus aren't even getting a buy option. But you're like, so you've spent 14 million euros, which was very little, huge bargain. And now you've basically just given him the Chelsea profile, and that alone making him more value. And now after 6 months, you're already looking to ship him out. Now we're getting £4 million as a loan fee, which is pretty good for 5 months, to be fair, for a player that we paid less than triple that 6 months ago. But then presumably in the summer, after he's hopefully had a good loan at Juventus, he's going to be shipped on after 12 months. And after 12 months to ship the players, it seems a bit like you're not even buying to like see, okay, the ones that make it, we keep. The ones that don't make it, we sell for profit. It's like you are from the get-go only ever thought of sign for profit. You know what I mean? Just because there's also so many of similar age group that I'm like, well, you can't all make it. It's physically impossible.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. I think it's interesting. Your answer is interesting to my counter question. I think it's definitely a fair point. And like Vega's definitely an interesting one as well, right? Like it was only a couple of months ago, I remember reading something on how he'd been like Chelsea's best buy of the summer. Like you know, that was a respectable opinion because he played so well in the Conference League and was like coming on in the Premier League. And yeah, I mean, a good way of rounding this off probably is just like, I was speaking to Chelsea friend the other day, Yapted Gura, goes by Ball Talk on Twitter. You might have seen his stuff. We're having a chat about Chelsea, and he came up with a great line that was, it's like Chelsea can't play enough games. It's as soon as the Conference League has gone out and you can't give the chances to the likes of Veiga and other players, that's when the problems have come in. And that's just said to him that I'll probably make a video on that. It's just such a funny like line that everyone's complaining about playing too much football. Chelsea aren't getting enough football.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the issue. And I don't really know why we're putting ourselves in that situation. I'm trying to get the tweet about Renato Veiga up, but for some reason, StreamYard is making me struggle doing so. It should be straightforward, but for some reason, it's not allowing it to be straightforward. So I'll hopefully can make that happen. Is that it? Nope, that is the wrong one. Why are you making it difficult, StreamYard? Just let me scroll my tabs. That's all I need. That's all I need. It's just there. There we go. Thank you. So Renato Veiga, obviously we talked about it, £4 million, £5 million loan fee. Now, can I ask you, I'm not sure if you heard of Veiga at all before Chelsea had signed him. I'm not sure if you looked much into him when we did sign him. There you go. Now, for me, and then I heard, okay, he plays DM and left back, and I'm like, then I looked at him and I'm like, well, that's some horse shit, because look at him. He's the most obvious centre-back you've ever seen in your life. And now, 6 months into being here and not playing at inverted left-back all season, he's like, actually, guys, I really want to play centre-back because that's where Portugal play me. So now I would like to go on loan to play centre-back, because this is very much a loan that he kind of forced and he made happen because he wants to play centre-back, but Chelsea aren't playing him as centre-back. So he's like, then I want to go on loan. And Chelsea were like, okay, then we'll sell you on a permanent. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to go on loan. So, yeah. For me, he always screamed centre-back. So I'm not mad at this from his perspective at all. I'm like, he should have the whole time been our backup left-sided centre-back, in my opinion. Probably ahead of Badiashile, quite frankly. But he was never a left-back. But now we're letting him go, and we're not even signing a backup left-back anyway. So that's why it's like, that's why the title and on the thumbnail it says, do we have a strategy kind of behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't grasping, or is it just a big mess? And you know how you talked about we can't spend forever and we need to sell players. That's the next problem that we have at the moment. Everything that happens is we're asking for some sort of swap deal, you know? But like we want Tel, we're like, do you want Nkunku by any chance? Juve are getting Veiga. We inquired about Douglas Luiz. We inquired about God knows whoever. Like every time we sell someone to somewhere, we try to buy one from there. Or when we try to buy, we're like, do you want a player in return as well, maybe? And that's just all we do at the moment. And that's fine to an extent, but it also ends you with letting Ian Martin go, who, to be fair, hasn't really gotten to do much at Aston Villa, which I'm slightly surprised about, but fair enough. But we sign Kellyman instead, who, again, no one has ever heard of before, and probably no one will ever hear of again. But for PSR reasons, we signed him for 19 million, and he's not even touched the under-21s pitch yet. So, because he's been injured, to be fair, but yeah, it's. I mean, yeah. Just to go back on Veiga, do you think that's valid from him? It's like, I want to play centre back, not inverted left back, because I know you said he did good in the Conference League and he did in some games, but then I'm like, yeah, but it's still the Conference League. Like he should be better than all of these players, and yeah, he was. But he was also when we played Almaty away in Kazakhstan. He was or Astana away in Almaty. He was the one that was kind of like the 1 second fell asleep to defend. And I'm not saying that means he's not a good player. But if you don't stand out in the Conference League, maybe Chelsea's like, well, if you're not good standing out in the Conference League, maybe you're just not good enough and we get rid of you. But Man, it just feels like fair enough, let him go, but then replace him. And if you're not replacing him, just keep him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah, if you ask me, like, if I get it from his perspective, totally. I think the issue Chelsea have, which probably no other football team in the world have, is they've got too many left-sided centre backs. It's such a rare quality, and you've got Veiga, you've got Cole, you've got Badiashile. Like,
obviously, Cucurella plays that role as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention this before. Like on Chelsea centre back issue, I can foresee Maresca playing Reece James as a right-sided centre back just to push wide, and Gusto comes in. So maybe you've got a little bit more depth than it seems. But yeah, totally get it from Vega's perspective, and yeah, maybe this has the potential to bite Chelsea, like from a PR perspective, if they do struggle more with injuries as the season goes on and have a crisis at centre back. And Veiga, I assume, goes straight into Juventus' first team because they're looking for cover for the injured Gelson Bremer. Then, yeah, Chelsea could end up looking very silly. The only thing I have to all of this is that, like, what happened in the summer, and slight caveat, I guess, because we're in January, it's the same season, so maybe these feelings it should change. But in the summer, everyone was saying, "What are Chelsea doing? Big mess." And then they went on for a great start to the season, and everyone actually praised their transfers. And I know you said you feel like the transfers in the season were in the summer flops. I think I disagree. I think, or like, not flops in terms of not playing. I think that's fair, but I think as long as your transfers aren't actively making you worse, or like you've signed first team players and they're not working, and that's actively making the team worse, it's hard to call it a flop. João Felix, sure, you signed him and he might not be playing well, or it might not be playing much, but he's come on and affected a couple of games, right? That contributes to you getting points. And other than that, he's not like held the team back. Just as one example, right? Same with Renato Veiga. So I guess from like purely,
in what sense that João Felix has held us back, and this is not a João Felix problem. And I've actually been very positively surprised and impressed by Felix, because whenever he's got the chance, he's done exactly what a lot of people always say that he doesn't do. Doesn't work hard enough, doesn't press, doesn't track back, and he's done that every single time he's touched the pitch. Even in the Conference League, when you're like, you'd think someone like João Felix would be like, almost, this is a bit beneath me, and not maybe try 1,000%. But he has. And let alone when he's played in the Prem, he's done it even more so. But the problem that he's caused, at the fact that we wanted to get Samu Omarodion, but then he somehow supposedly failed his medical, but we still really wanted to get rid of Gallagher to Atletico. We're like, okay, which other players could we get? And you're like, okay, let's get João Felix. But what problem did that create? Instead of signing Samu Omarodion, a backup striker to Nicholas Jackson, and making Christopher Nkunku the number 10, we signed João Felix, which meant Nkunku had to be the backup striker. And now that meant it completely derailed Nkunku's career at Chelsea, and João Felix still doesn't really have a spot in the team. So even though this isn't a João Felix problem itself, it's not the individual players, you're right, aren't necessarily that bad, but it's more the results that they've brought because they did in the summer already what they're doing now again, where we have certain squad issues, but instead of fixing those squad issues, they're buying other players, and that's kind of almost creating other squad issues.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I would say
even when you touched on with Reece James, right? That's 100% valid. But then we recalled Trevor Chalobah to play right centre back, and now what position did he play in his first game back? Left centre back. Now, should right-footed Trevor Chalobah be left centre back? Maybe, maybe not. He was man of the match, to be fair, so I guess it worked. But we have a lot of left-sided centre backs. But the problem is left-sided centre back and left back is almost one group of players at Chelsea now, because obviously it was Veiga. Then you had Cucurella, who's the only real left back that we have left now, that Vega's left, except academy players who we seemingly don't want to use at the moment. And then the other ones are either Colwell or Badiashile or now Chalobah. You'd rather have Colwell as the central centre back, not the left one. Sure, he can do it, but you'd rather have him in the middle because his passing just works better from that position. Then who do you play left centre back? If you're not playing Colwell there, all the others, are they starting quality? Maybe Chalobah. But I would have rather seen him on the right than on the left. So it just feels like, yeah, okay, we have centre-backs. But, it's like when at Spurs away, early December, I'm not sure if you remember, we started a game with Caicedo inverting from right back and Badiashile starting at right centre-back. And his angles were just all wrong. And that's why we subbed it at half-time, and our second half was much better. But he just could not hack the situation of all of a sudden being on his right side. He had constantly opened his foot to pass with the left, but then the angles weren't there to actually find teammates, and he constantly just had to pass it back to Sanchez, and we allowed their press, made it so easy for them. And yeah, maybe I'm waffling, I'm rambling too much almost in my frustration because, like I say, it's the individual players, whether it's Felix, whether it's, pretty much all of them. The individuals aren't the problem. It's more like the individuals you signed aren't the individuals we needed, and the individuals you were interested in, you decided not to sign for various reasons, whether it's John Duran or Samuel Omrodion. Well, like, yeah, if we just had that backup striker, we'd have half our issues right now, and you could focus on a winger. If you did that in the summer, like we all wanted and like we all knew we needed, then all you could do right now is focus on a winger. It'd be no problem. You know what I mean? So it's frustrating. I'll bring this up here quickly because you touched on Mathys Tel, because just on exactly this conversation, when the links to Mathys Tel came up, the reason why I was quite positive about that, if I can actually find it, there you go, was that he could be an option for left wing and striker, and we kind of needed a player in both, but we didn't need a starter in either. So that's why someone like Tel would have made sense. A backup, but a backup that we need in two different positions. Therefore, he will get a significant amount of minutes that he's probably going to be happy with. But he doesn't make unnecessarily Sancho not start, or doesn't make unnecessarily Jackson put like an Osimhen in front of him for no reason. So, yeah, and supposedly he could change his mind still, which would just be typical. We sign Garnacho, then tell us, like, actually, I would come, and we're like, fuck, now we can't afford it. That'd be very typical. I mean, if you had to pick between signing Tel and Garnacho, who would you prefer between those two?
Oh, I've not looked into Tel, because by the time I went to look into him, Christoph Freund made it very clear that he wasn't going to allow Tel to leave Bayern. So I can't give you an answer, I'm afraid.
Fair enough, but surely you have an overall idea of what Tel is like as a player. No, like obviously I'm not.
He's barely played.
You're an athletic analyst. You're just giving a normal football fan's opinion. It's okay.
As a normal football fan's opinion, he's barely played. I couldn't tell you, I'm afraid. So that's the problem, right? He said the problem he wants to leave Bayern is because he's not getting any minutes. So I've not even casually I've seen him very well. So even as like speculative Alex, Euro expert Alex, I can't say I wouldn't be able to say.
Well, or inadvertently that just means you'd probably pick Garnacho because the other guy isn't playing enough. But which is also fair. Which is the why I find it so weird anyway that his stance at the moment is that he doesn't want to leave. I'm like, you played quite a lot last year, scored a lot of important goals. I say a lot. He scored 7 goals, but a lot of them were crucial, late goals off the bench. And now you've played 350 minutes and not scored by the time we've hit nearly February. I'm like, why are you trying so hard to stay there? Clearly company doesn't rate you. So I don't really know what's happening there. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I wanna deep dive with you a little bit, because otherwise it's mostly me rambling about our squad planning. I want to deep dive with you a little bit on Garnacho because I'm intrigued where you stand on him. Now, I've opened this up and it doesn't tell you a lot. It doesn't tell you everything. Absolutely. My take, and I've said this for the last few days, I've said this on my podcast with Pies, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if you haven't checked it out, Chelsea Unfiltered, every week, every Tuesday, new episode with CFCPys on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. That I don't think Garnacho is a bad player, and I don't think you can name me that many players that are his age and are better in his position. I don't think there's that many 20-year-old wingers that are so much better than Garnacho. Obviously, you've got Lamine Yamal, but once you take him out of the equation, there's not that many anymore. But the problem is, for me, it's like opportunity again. It's like, okay, United are seemingly, according to the Times, they've admitted that they are in danger of breaking PSR rules. So they're desperate for money. They're cutting all the costs that they can. But the discipline, the attitude just seems dangerous. Now, of course, Jadon Sancho had this bad reputation from Manchester United and has come to Chelsea, and has been the perfect professional. There's not been a single thing that you could have complained about with Jadon Sancho since being here, whether it's the work rate, whether it's tracking back, as far as we know, in terms of attitude of training, arriving late, none of that. So maybe that could happen with Garnacho, but my guy was tweeting likes against his old manager, then deleting it again, then retweeting, then deleting it again. His brother is throwing all sorts of things out. There was the rumors that he was sharing the team news by Manchester United. Is that the player you should go for, man? Like, I don't know. Obviously, it's tough for us. Like, we can only really judge what we see on the football pitch, and the other stuff is tabloids and Twitter accounts. So how true is it really? Difficult to judge. But that's my bigger worry than his ability, plus the price tag. Where do you stand on Garnacho, bro? And do you think what we're looking at here has any sort of relevance? And if so, what do you... I mean, everybody talks about that the shots is kind of his biggest attribute, that we don't have enough wingers that take a lot of shots. and he takes a lot of shots. So I guess from that perspective, he makes sense to add something to our squad that we maybe don't have. But otherwise, talented, but do we need it? I go back to the same question every time.
Well, yeah, let's go for it. And I don't worry, I can go into depth on this one, and we'll go through his report. I will say, to answer your first thing about like how good he is and like comparing to other wingers around Europe, I think that is absolutely fair to say. In left wing position, probably like one of the best, if not the best, in that age bracket on the market. So for the people watching, also a bit of a teaser. Laurenz, don't say a word because you know who I'm talking about. I'm doing a sensible transfers on Chelsea at the moment. I'll hopefully come out this weekend if it does get delayed or anything. And one of the players, I was looking at Garnacho. I was also looking at Jamie Gittins. And the only reason I went against them, just on a preliminary basis before I looked properly into Garnacho, was because they didn't really fit the athletic requirements of sensible transfer. Well, it wasn't quite under the radar. It'd be very expensive. Garnacho it seems like it would be a very tricky move to pull off. Player I did end up going with is on the screen right now, and I'll let you figure that out. But diving into Garnacho, let's go through this, and I've got some fairly detailed thoughts. Hopefully, that will provide some analysis you won't be able to get anywhere else. So let's start at the top. These goals, his shots. I think Garnacho's quite an interesting shooter. So he's underperformed his XG 2 seasons in a row, which suggests he's a bad finisher. Not necessarily sure that's the case. So on his right foot, I think there's reason to get quite excited. He's a really good ball striker, which means he can get a lot of power when he shots and some decent accuracy. I think what lets him down is he takes a lot of shots, which is good. Took the most shots in Man United squad last season, but he tends to take them from quite bad positions, I felt. Just kind of shooting into bodies, shooting from range quite often. So I think that's part of why he's underperformed his XG. I think the other part is a reliance on one technique. So Garnacho, like quite often on his right foot, use the inside or inside of his boot. Rarely see him use his laces, and I think that's kind of let him down at times. So he'll go 1v1 and try and squirm to use the inside of his right foot when he doesn't need
Makes
to.
Makes it too obvious what he's going to do as well, no?
No, not necessarily. I guess so, yes. But I think it's more that this is something that Omar Mamouche gets as well, where he'll be in a situation where you might want to lace it in the top corner. You want to maybe hit it with your left foot, but he's squirming to hit it on his right, on the inside. He's like manipulating his whole body to do it. And it just means you don't get a great connection. So that's let him down a couple of times 1v1. I will say on the other positively shooting side, you look at his shots, around a third of them are coming from his left foot. I think he scored 7 goals on his left compared to 14 on his right as well. And I think he gets really good power on his left.
Is the technique situation the same on his left foot, or is that more of a right foot issue in terms of that he always goes for the inside of the boot rather than the laces?
Great question. I think it's more of a right foot issue. I think on his left, and this is something you get with a lot of players, he can get quite a good power on it, and that's generally enough to see him by. I think it actually means he's unpredictable on his left. He doesn't rely on a certain technique. He'll just kind of look to hit at whatever angle suits best. So weirdly, he can almost feel like a better shooter on his left at close range anyway. Long range is definitely his right foot. I think that's his goal scoring covered. Let's move into creativity. So we can see his expected assisted goals is quite low. Don't think that's fair on him. I actually think he's a really good crosser. Again, this comes down to him being good on his left foot and kind of a bit more of an encompassing view here. I think Garnacho is quite a good two-way winger. He's someone who can go both on the inside and outside. And when he goes on the outside, he's capable of putting a really nice crossing on his left foot and getting his head up as well and picking a teammate out. It's not just hitting and hoping. And his assists, he actually should get more for his assists. I think he hit 5.9 expected assists last season and only got 4 assists in the Premier League. So I think you could blame Manchester United's teammates for that. So
that was going to be my question to you anyway. I'll let you finish all your points about Garnacho, because a big point is how much of what we're talking about, whether it's the stats we see or even what we watch with our own eyes, how much of that is down to Man United? Even the shooting in wrong positions. How much is that Bruno Fernandes being his captain, whose favorite thing is shooting when he's not in the right position? Like how much of that is that to blame? It's like the whole club is a big mess. Like Chelsea, we're maybe not in a position to talk clubs being in a mess. We've had experience of that for the last couple of years. Now it's a little bit more settled and a bit more stable. And I just can't go back to it. Sancho seems to have been a problem at United and no problem with us. So I guess there's that hope. But then there's also Noni Madueke, who seems to still be a problem also at Chelsea. So it's not like we're just completely, immune to players with bad attitude.
Yeah, I think that was actually my next point. So this works quite well. The context of Manchester United is really important here. I think the stuff I've spoken about so far, like mainly his technique, that's individual to him. And I will say as well, basically all of my notes are based from last season rather than this season. So I like to think that's in the absence of the total mess they're in at the moment, just in like a tactical way, like 2 managers in 1 season. And I think there's, from what you're talking about, comparing Garnacho's situation at Man United to what it'd be at Chelsea, I think there are reasons to be positive over a move and think he could be better at Chelsea. I think there's a question of whether he could be worse in a certain way as well, though. But first, let's talk about why he could be better and why he's struggled at Man United. First of all, last season, he was right at the top of their squad for progressive passes received. You can see it right there, actually. So what that shows in English and not nerd talk is Man United were consistently targeting him to do stuff, whether that was on the left and right-hand side. Talking of which, prefers playing on the left, was also playing on the right-hand side as well. So sometimes out of position, either way, becoming the fulcrum of a team when he was only 19 years old. Not necessarily ideal conditions. But there is also, I think, a reason to be a little worried about him moving to Chelsea, just in terms of the context. And this is all the off-field stuff aside. Obviously, Manchester United, very bad spot. We've covered that. But Manchester United and Erik ten Hag were a very transitional team. And that means Garnacho was quite often having a lot of space to run into, which I think he thrives at. He's a very, very quick player, a very agile player, well-balanced. I have a bit of concern on how he'll play against teams who are sitting deep, against when he's having to dribble from a standing start. And there's a couple of technical reasons why. I think Garnacho, when he's dribbling past players, he tends to do so by knocking it past them, or just like when he's running at speed, he can just change his body a bit
quite quickly and stuff.
Yeah, he can change direction quicker than a defender can change direction. But when it's from a standing start, I don't think you see much sort of duping him. Like, he's not tricking your defenders to go one way.
Sancho, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good way of summing it up, right? And his dribble success rate is only 36% last season, which is really, really bad, in my opinion. Like, that's one of the lowest of most wingers I tend to look at when saying they should be going
because
to a big
when you
club.
look at him, he looks like he'd be a good dribbler. Like, when you look at him, and even when you see clips, right? I can't pretend to watch Man United full games that regularly, but when you see clips of Garnacho, it's like, well, he looks like he can at least dribble. But it's interesting that you say it's mostly from a running position, or at least not from standstill. I mean,
yeah.
Obviously, you can elaborate more. It's an interesting one when I think about what that reminds me of in our squad. It's difficult. I'm not sure if it fully goes into that Neto direction, but it goes in the direction where I'm like, I'm not sure if it would work. I'm sure you've looked enough into what Chelsea do and what Maresca does in terms of that. In principle, he wants the wingers to stay wide, hold the width, because we don't have fullbacks doing so. But then once one winger does get the ball, the opposite winger is meant to be a danger at the far post. And that's the part that doesn't happen. For whatever reason, neither Madueke, nor Neto, nor Sancho. Mudryk, to be fair, was the closest one doing it, but now he's banned. The whole winger at the far post thing, either we don't reach them or they're not there. Do you think that's the one thing that he could improve most on what we have already? Because it's one thing talking about his own strengths, but it's another thing talking about what he adds to our squad that we don't have yet.
Mm-hmm. I think that is, like, that's worth mentioning. I was looking for his goals earlier, and mainly from the right-hand side, he's arriving at the back post. But I think he's capable of adding that, because one of his positives, I think, is his movement. Even against a block, I think he makes quite nice positive runs inside. So I think that is something he can add. I think there's a lot to add off the ball, and like just very quick actions like shooting, like you say. But yeah, like, is what you were just talking about as well. You want the wingers to stay high and wide, and quite often take fullbacks on the standing start. That's the area where I'm not necessarily, think it's a bad move or anything. I think that's just the biggest question mark over Garnacho and his fit over Chelsea. And like, before I hand it back to you, it's worth caveating, he's still really young. He's only 20 years old. Like, he can improve at a lot of this stuff.
I mean, someone in a group chat of mine asked today, like, who we think is better, Garnacho or Madueke? And I was like, well, right now, I think Madueke. But in terms of when Madueke was 20, I'm pretty sure Garnacho is better than when Madueke was 20. So, but then obviously you have those questions in terms of how do they develop. I mean, Waldo in the chat out you, he's essentially asking you, is he worth 60 million though? And that's kind of the problem. And to be honest, it's not clear whether he will cost 60 million. We know Napoli have had a bid of, in total, 50 million euros rejected, which is just under 45 million pounds. And there was talk from, was it the Telegraph or I can't remember, some fairly reputable source was talking about the deal could get done for around 50 million pounds, which, I don't know, between 56 and 60 million euros. The lower it is, the better it is. But I think 60 million is very steep. Especially, like, I already thought Neto was steep for 60 million. But Neto had a lot more justification for costing 60 million than Garnacho does. Just purely by, actually a bit more experience and a bit more proven, I guess. And less the whole risk attached with Man United. It's difficult to judge anyone what they do there.
I don't know, man. I think he is worth 60 mil. In this market, like, let's not forget, he's still scored... contributed over 10 goals and assists in the Premier League as a 19-year-old in his first season as a starter, like a proper real starter. That is like, I think it is hard to detach him from the context of Man United and like the form they're going through right now. He's also not a brilliant fit for Ruben Amorim's system either. So, like, I think right now it might not feel like he's worth 60 million, but if we're talking about like last summer, like, absolutely, I think he absolutely would be worth that. I think what we're talking about here is like, is he worth 60 million?
Worth it to us?
Yes, and that's a trickier question. I think maybe the answer is more no, considering you've got other areas to address.
Yeah, I mean, what they say, you're basically saying he's on the same level as Kvaratskhelia.
No.
Are you saying that? Because Kvaratskhelia went for 65 million?
Well, no, because it's a Premier League premium, right? I mean, to be fair, if we're talking objective value, that's an interesting question. Like, I guess in my head, when I say is he worth 60 million, I'm thinking in today's market, like, I guess like this is a youngster, first Premier League season, etc., etc. Maybe that's changed. That's a very good counterpoint. Maybe he's like closer between 40 and 50. Like, Kvaratskhelia is more of the finished product. So that is actually a really fair point. I
mean, if I could pick my left wing, I would pick Barcola, and purely because
so would I.
Exactly, and purely because, like, well, they signed Kvaratskhelia, maybe Barcola is a bit annoyed by that or something. So maybe you could make something happen. And how much more would he cost? Probably a bit more, but.
Yeah, and I've tried lists. I've said this a couple of times, and PSG fans in their droves have said no. I actually had a PSG fan voice message me the other day explaining why that's not the case and why Barcola can happily play on the right. And I'm afraid, I have to be the doomsayer and say I don't think he's going anywhere, even though he's really good.
Yeah, that was it. Because we were linked with him last summer already, and I can't really remember if we then pulled out or if we just lost out to PSG or what exactly happened, but. Yeah, that would be my wish or dream, at least. It's an interesting one. I mean, like you said, between 40 and 50 million, I don't think that'd be that many people complaining about the signing. Obviously, then you still have the off-field stuff, whether it's, himself liking tweets that he shouldn't like, throwing up hissy fits when he's not playing, supposedly leaking team news, which that's my biggest issue, really. Like, I hate people that.
I think he did deny that, to be fair.
I would deny it too if I did it.
It's all social media stuff. I feel like that sort of stuff is only when it's like properly reported. Like John Duran, for example, is an interesting one because that's like reported by lots of reputable places. Like he's throwing hissy fits behind the scenes at Aston Villa and being a bit difficult to handle. I think that's when it's like, yeah, that's a bit more worrying. Whereas Garnacho, like, I've spoken to Manchester United fans and I've not seen any of them be like, oh, Garnacho's a problem. Like, most of them are like, this is such a ridiculously talented player. It's unbelievable we could be letting him go, let alone to a Premier League rival.
Yeah, and that's the interesting bit. And that's what I do say to people that like use it as too much, like as in, okay, there's no way we should be going for this because, etc. And I'm like, well, I'm honestly not involved enough in Manchester United off-pitch drama to really have a fair judgment on this. And then I go back to the Sancho point where I'm like, well, he had a bad rep. That's been all right so far. So like maybe it's worth taking the risk. I don't know. It's really tough. I mean, obviously it's not us making that decision on whether Chelsea go for that or not. If Chelsea were to sign him, how do you think Chelsea should, and I don't want to ask you will, because maybe you find it difficult to judge. So maybe just your opinion. How do you think we should then split our wingers? Because my thinking is, because I still think Sancho does not deserve dropping. Now, so either then Garnacho is the backup to Sancho, or the other option that you could have, because neither Neto nor Madueke have been good enough, in my opinion, you put Sancho on the right. and then you let kind of Garnacho be the more goal threat winger from the left-hand side, and you let Sancho be the kind of creative winger from the right-hand side. Maybe Sancho actually benefits from using his right foot for the cutbacks and crosses anyway, in terms of being creative. How do you think we should use our wingers? And obviously you're like, well, the other two will play in a Conference League and FA Cup. Yeah, no, obviously. But I mean more for like the main games type thing.
God damn, everyone dislikes Madueke. I love him so much.
No, I like Madueke as well. I think Madueke is better than Neto, but he's not been good this season.
Well, that's a topic for another day. I disagree from what I've seen.
Maybe he's not been good for 2 months is more fair. He's been all right before that, I guess. But a lot of that was carried by the hat-trick against Wolves, I can't lie.
Yeah, fair. But yeah, I mean, how you use him, I think, is actually the easiest point. Like, don't view him as a starter. He should be rotation. He's a 20-year-old wonder kid. Like, he shouldn't. The part of the problem of the moment he's had is he's been made a first-team starter when he's clearly like no youngster should be made.
Will he be okay with going from starting at United to not starting?
Yeah, I think so. I absolutely think so. Like, he's been used out of position at Man United as well, and I think in terms of tactical though, let's focus on that. I think there's clear usage for Chelsea's wingers, and it's what we've seen earlier in the season, right? When Mudryk was playing, and you could pick him between him and Sancho or Neto on the left, and it's against low blocks. You play Sancho because he can has that possibility to play those passes, unlock teams. When you're have a bit more space to exploit, or if Sancho isn't quite working, you want to bring in a bit more explosivity, then you introduce Garnacho because he's that different type of player. He's wants to run at defenders and he's better in space. So I think it will depend on who you play, like less so in the Premier League and the Conference League, just more the type of opponent you face. And I think credit goes to Maresca. He was doing that really well in the first. I think that's one of the best things he's done so far this season. Like, certainly in the first couple of months, he was really alternating between those wingers. Yeah. Like,
it's the only position where he really did rotate, if I'm being honest.
Fair.
Like, obviously, he rotated a lot between competitions, but in terms of in the Premier League, the wingers were kind of outside of injuries. Obviously, in defense, we had a lot of rotation due to injuries. But when players were fit, the wingers were kind of the only ones who were getting rotated. I guess because there's maybe more clearly a difference in demand respective to the opposition, while for the central areas, he wants what he wants almost no matter who we play against. And so I hear that.
A bit for the midfield between Lavia, Enzo, and Caicedo. Sometimes it Lavia and Caicedo.
There was a small period where Enzo was like kind of, let's call it, benched for a little bit. But the problem is that only works when Lavia is fit. So that was happening for like a month. And otherwise, Lavia hasn't been fit. So then when Lavia has been fit, there's no one to rotate other than bloody Casadei. And that's not happening either, is it? So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of the problem. It's interesting, the way you see it, because I don't know, man. I mean, can I just quickly ask you? I'm not sure if you spoke about him back when you were on in August. I'm not even sure if we had signed him yet, Neto. What do you make of Neto? And I'm not sure how much you've seen of him at Chelsea, because obviously he's only 6 months in. 6 months in, Cucurella was terrible. And now he's, for me, the best left back in the world. But obviously, that's up for debate.
Oh, that's a big take.
Very much a biased, stance, I guess. So, we can't judge a player fully after 6 months. But those 6 months, 460 million, have, for me, been extremely underwhelming. Works very hard, but he reminds me of a worse Villian, where I'm like, yeah, I don't constantly want to talk about my winger's best attribute being tracking back, though. Like, I'd rather it be something else.
Yeah, I think if 6 months ago we said Pedro Neto hasn't worked out, we wouldn't have guessed it would be for performance-related issues. It would have been because his legs have exploded again
all season. That's the most shocking thing.
Yeah, that is really shocking. Yeah, I have caught bits of him. Like we said, he hasn't played every game because we've actually rotated the wingers quite well. It's difficult because he's played on both the left and right-hand side, and I think
when watching, by the way, terrible on the left for us. So I'm not saying overall, but for us, been absolutely awful when he's playing on the left. He just does nothing.
Does he? From what I've seen, does he do quite well though on the left when it's like?
I'm not sure what we've missed, bro, but we might have missed something.
I feel like was it against Newcastle where Neto was quite good on the left, where he cut the ball back for an assist? I feel like in those moments,
I'm sure there was a game or two where he's been all right, but as in the grand scheme of things, usually when he's been on the left, I wish he was just playing on the right or Sancho was playing. That was at least my reaction. Just my take on Neto. I think his best attribute is crossing, other than tracking back, and we don't have anyone to do anything with a cross because Jackson isn't good in the air and we don't have another striker. So that I'm sure hinders Neto looking better than he does. But yeah, obviously he scored that phenomenal goal against Arsenal, but otherwise it was kind of just Conference League stat padding, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, he's ranked really low for goals anyway, just like last year or so. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, I think I've seen like decent moments, but overall for 60 million, I think it's fair to be like, maybe you could have got more. But especially when like Noni Madueke, when I remember we've already spoke about him, but I remember last summer I went on, I can't remember the platform, but I went on like a Chelsea sort of live podcast thing, and I was getting so much respect from everybody, and it was like all the cool kids are like on my side. And they said, "What do you think about Madueke?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think he's good." And everyone, "Oh man, what you mean?" And everyone was like, "It's like I dropped the bomb." It's the last summer. It was like Madueke's the worst winger Chelsea have got, and maybe it says a bit more about Neto than it does about him. That everyone, it does seem to be like between him and Sancho, Madueke, Sancho, the best wingers Chelsea got, and Neto, the big signing, hasn't actually been that player.
Which is probably why a lot of people are so hesitant to sign another winger for 60 million after obviously the whole Neto situation. Madueke is a weird one. It's a bit like what I'm concerned about with Garnacho with off-pitch stuff, where it's like supposed bust-ups between him and Veiga, and that's why they were left out of the squad once, and then there was another time where he was late, and that's why he was dropped, and then you see him play, and you're like, you're clearly so good, and then randomly he has a game where he just can't control the football, where it's like it happens. Like every week, I swear it happens. He gets a through ball and he makes the run, doesn't really realize where the ball is. And the ball kind of hits him in his heel as he's running and bounces off him. And I'm like, bro, you're too good for this. Like you clearly are a good player. You've got a great shot in you on your left foot, which he uses way too rarely. And the attitude thing is just like he loses the ball and moans. I'm like, no, bro, you need to turn around and run back, man. That's what you need to be doing. But it's obviously a lot easier said than done, isn't it? That whole don't be annoyed. I'm sure we've all played football, lost the ball, and been annoyed, and not straight away sprinted back, even if we obviously don't get paid like those footballers do. I mean, I've got another couple things that you might not be the most informed on, but just to speak about it quickly because they were news that essentially came out today. It's a few weird ones. Now, first of all, we're interested in Hellas Verona midfielder Reda Berahini.
Oh, you have sprung it on me.
I have. I told you before. Now, I'm not asking you for an opinion. I'm just sharing it with the stream because it was today's news, essentially. We're supposedly using him to replace Casadei. Casadei, who we've not yet managed to actually sell, are looking to sell for a loss, but we're trying to get such a big sell-on clause that hopefully we are making our money back, but probably won't, because he'll be sold for even less money in 3 years in this area, and then we get a whole 1.5 million from our 40% sell-on clause. So that's brilliant. But yeah, so this guy, he's been explained to me as basically Kovacic in terms of, and then I've seen his stat sheet, and he's good at dribbling and nothing else. So yeah, I don't know. It takes me into another conversation that is more interesting and is more, you're more caught up on, Alex. It's the idea that people are saying, yeah, maybe we'll sign him, use him as the backup until the summer, and then send him to Strasbourg as we get Andre Santos back in the summer. Mm-hmm. Because that's obviously the next kind of issue that Chelsea fans have had this January. It's now January 23rd. All of us have said since early December, we need a new midfielder. On the one hand, due to quality, because Casadei just wasn't it. But also, just wasn't trusted that way. Veiga, obviously, a lot of people told us he's a DM as well. Well, he wasn't trusted there either. And then with Lavia's injury concerns, currently Enzo Fernandez is also injured. We essentially only have Moises Caicedo. And Dewsbury Hall, obviously. But, the less I say about Dewsbury Hall, the better, because I'll just get myself in trouble. So, how can you explain that in the position that we're in? I've just explained it to you in terms of how many players we're missing. You know how Chelsea sets up, how we use a lot of midfielders. How we have Leslie Ugochukwu on loan at Southampton and Andre Santos on loan at Strasbourg. That's even our sister club. So we have full control over what the situation is. And we've not chosen to recall either, because I think you're a big fan of Andre Santos, aren't you?
I am. I don't think he's ready to return to Chelsea right now, though. I think he will be in the summer. Yeah. I think what you have to remember of Andre Santos, and let me say this, I've not actually completed my scout report, but I'm in the midst of it right here. So you may have seen on Twitter, I started it today. I've already been following Strasbourg this season, though, nearly as much as Chelsea. Like, I think in a couple of months, I will have watched more Strasbourg than I will of Chelsea this season, because I've just found them really fascinating. They're Chelsea light, and I think the context I can give to people who, fair enough, you would have only seen him in comps because It's the easiest way to access him, and Nkunku will look great. Strasbourg are a fun team. They're very ill-disciplined. They're out of possession, something that Maresca clearly values. Like, it was clear at the beginning of his tenure, he worked on that before working on the attacking play. Strasbourg's pressing is really poor. Like, that's Liga, and it gets by. Not great in the Premier League. And as a result, Santos, who's a very aggressive midfielder, can often make poor decisions. I think he needs a pre-season with Maresca to kind of iron those things out before he gets properly introduced into Premier League football. So there's that side. But there's also the thing as well. He's like, we'll give you the thing to get excited about, which is, yes, on other areas, he's developing really nicely. Like, so he's one of Transfer's most crucial players, and you kind of don't want to disrupt that. And
just quickly, for people, not for you, I'm sure you are aware of this, Alex, but for people, we might have initially seen Santos as more of like the Caicedo type midfielder. I think if he were to come into our midfield, he would be the backup to Enzo Fernandez's position and not to Moises Caicedo's position. So in my opinion, he wouldn't even solve our midfield DM problem right now as much. You can have a different take on this, fair enough. I don't watch Strasbourg all the time. Part of it is also judging, well, the goal output is too high to be a flat DM. So, can't be Caicedo's backup from that logic alone. But yeah, it's an interesting take because a lot of people have been very much, almost Santos is so ready that if we bring it back, you'd almost need to start him regularly. But it's interesting that you're saying, well, give him until the summer and you'll be better off for it. That is an interesting one. Did you want to add any more to Andre Santos there? There you go. Go on.
Yeah, I won't go on too long. Yeah, it's not the case. He's nowhere near ready to start, for Chelsea. Like, that's.
Is it discipline mainly for you? That's the issue, or is it just transition moments, defensive transitions when losing the ball?
It's like his all-round game. Like, he's a really young, high potential player, but for the biggest strength I was going to say for him, his passing is great. Like, I love his vision, and I reckon in a couple of years he'll be, if he comes back to Chelsea, he could be one of the Premier League's best passers. Like, he's so good at firing them through the block, but like, he does match that at times with just inaccurate passing because he sees a pass that isn't on, forces it, and then gives the ball away. So like, it's just easy when you see his best moments. It's easy to think, yeah, he's great. Like, you're only seeing his best bits. He could start for Chelsea. That's not the case. What I did want to counter what you said though about replacing Enzo Fernandez. From watching quite a bit this season, I do think he'd actually be your DM. He has scored goals, but he tends to be like the last one arriving in the box. Whereas, if you're playing a bit further forward, he'd probably be a bit closer to goal. And I do like what I said. I think he's aggression. Like, he's an aggressive player, and at the moment, I think it's more due to the way Strasbourg defend that can sometimes net him in bad situations. Do actually think his defensive awareness is pretty good, and he's always on edge, looking to press and like collect the ball. So I do think he'd be your future DM. But yeah, just to reinforce, not ready now, and that's absolutely fine. Not saying he's a bad player. It's just he's like any other young player. He's got weaknesses, needs to iron them out. Leave him alone. Let him develop.
Fair enough. Do you have many thoughts on Leslie Ugochukwu? Obviously on loan at Southampton. Do you have much of an idea about him?
I've not watched him much this season because I don't think he's played that much either. But
no,
yeah, he's another one where I think maybe he isn't Chelsea level. I remember when he first came through at Rennes, it was really easy to get hyped on him, and I'm sure I think I've done videos on him before, right? Like why he's amazing, but I think in the last few months or so, I've managed to improve my ability to analyze the game, and it does make me question like some of the past stuff I've said. And I think if Ugochukwu, looking back and like just some things, I feel like he might be someone who's just a bit too limited on the ball for Chelsea, and I could see why you wouldn't want to recall him. Especially, maybe it would have made sense if Pochettino is still a manager, because like that physicality could provide useful. But in Maresca's system, where I guess so much more emphasis is played on what you could do on the ball, then I can see why Ugochukwu isn't really getting a look in.
It's interesting because there's obviously clearly, you said both of them aren't really ready, but they are more ready than thin air. And because we don't have any backups, I know Chelsea loves signing players, but wouldn't it be better to just use Ugochukwu for 6 months? I'm not saying start him, but, have him as a DM backup to at least have one in the squad. I mean, he's already in the Premier League. You touched on him there that he's not playing. When Russell Martin was still the Southampton manager, he was basically not playing for 3 months straight. Often didn't even make the squad. And you're like, well, if this continues, obviously you have to bring him back. Whether we then keep him or loan him out again was at that point a different conversation. It's a bit like when with Andre Santos, I'm sure you're aware, he last season spent the first 6 months on loan at Forest and didn't get a single minute other than in a cup, I think. So that was obviously a waste. And who knows, had he gone to Strasbourg straight away, who knows how much further in development he'd already be. But for Ugo Chukwu, then once Southampton changed manager, he's since then playing pretty much all the time as far as I'm aware and supposedly doing quite well, but they're still only on 6 points. So it's like, how much development is done as the worst team in the league? You know, especially when the team you're, okay, to be fair, like you say, if he's not Chelsea quality and he will get sold anyway, that part doesn't matter. But how much are you really learning for Chelsea playing for the worst team in the league? Because it's even when people link us to Liam Delap, and Liam Delap, when we've played against him, he looked phenomenal. I love the guy. It looks like an English Diego Costa to me. But he's played for Ipswich, though. It's like he's not faced even a single one problem that Chelsea come up against every week. He's not faced that with Ipswich because of the context of how games go if you're a different kind of team. And that's kind of my worry with Ugo Chukwu, where I'm like, yeah, but what's the point in being there? You know, like I get what you're saying, maybe not good enough, but obviously the same can be said for a lot of players in our squad or that we have already loaned out. Whether it's, you know, I don't think Dewsbury Hall is anywhere near good enough. I don't think Renato Veiga, other than at centre back, is anywhere near good enough. I don't think Casada is anywhere near good enough. But still, they were in the squad and playing, not in the Prem, but they were in the squad and playing for the most part. So
I'll just quickly say, I feel like
what do you think we should do in midfield?
I was gonna say Ugo Chukwu. I think personally, that's probably just a case of his value will rise now. He's playing regularly, so they'll sell him. I think that's only a case. In midfield for Chelsea, though, remind me. So right now you've got Caicedo just about fit. Enzo Fernandez, I guess, is soon to come back from injury because he isn't soon to come back from injury. Lavia, big asterisk. Cassaday seems to be leaving. Dewsbury Hall, you said you'll get angry if you have to talk about him.
You can talk about him. Maybe you can convince me otherwise, but I doubt it.
I doubt it either. I mean, again, it's an awkward one because it's on paper you've got no midfielders, but then also you can make a lot of makeshift midfielders. Like you've made like your fullback will invert into midfield. Palmer can kind of play inside. If you're against weaker teams, you can get away with maybe a Palmer and Felix midfielder if Maresca's feeling really bold. So yeah, it's another tricky one.
It's not felt that bold yet, which is why we're so like we played Wolves the other day. We played in possession a diamond with Caicedo single 6, Cucurella left 8, Dewsbury Hall right 8, and then Palmer as a 10, and then obviously quite fluid, trying to have 6 in attack against the back 5 and everything. But that's on the ball. Off the ball, you still need someone to drop in next to Caicedo because we want to next to each other in the middle off the ball. So it's like what you're saying works on the ball. But then when we lose the possession, if you play with Palmer and Felix, Caicedo has to do the whole midfield on his own. And that's already a problem in and of itself. But when you don't have a backup for him to rest him sometimes or take him off in a game, that makes the whole thing even more difficult, you know?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. You've still got Chukwuemeka as well. I was just checking your squad. I think, I guess it's worth saying.
Yeah, but we're also trying to get rid of him, though.
Oh, fair enough. But it depends. If Chukwuemeka's training with your first team, then like, just because he's not playing now doesn't mean he might not be ready to come back in. Like, that is a point to consider.
But it seems like a bit of a squad politics situation where it's like, well, maybe I just like Chukwuemeka more than I like Dewsbury Hall, but it feels like it's usually between those two who gets the squad pick, who gets to start the Conference League game, who gets to start when other players are injured. It's kind of between those two, and well, one was signed more recently, so the guy that signed more recently gets to play. That's what it feels like anyway, because to me, Carney is far superior in every metric, really, but isn't getting the minutes. Like he's played, I think, twice this season. Would have maybe played once or twice more without injuries and illnesses at the wrong time, but you know, if you played someone twice, you're probably not going to start playing him now, are
you? Yeah, that's fair.
So, but if you're like, okay, both of the guys we have on loan are either not good enough or not ready, what if you were Chelsea right now? What would you do? Because there's been people throwing our things around. Get someone like Douglas Luiz on a 6-month loan until you can recall, or until you can just bring back Santos in the summer. Like just get a 6-month loan stopgap option. A bit like we did with Dennis Zakaria, but for a whole season. And that's the next thing that makes it even more difficult, where it's like, It's not even for a season. You're trying to get someone as a stopgap for 4 months. Like, it's nearly February now. If you sign them, by the time they'll be ready to play, adapted to the system, adapted to the team, unless they're Premier League experience and maybe whatever else, it's going to be nearly March. So then you signing someone on loan for 2.5 months. It's almost pointless. But we can't go into the rest of the season with only Caicedo as a DM. Like, we can't do that. Like, it's okay in the Prem, but I'm not sure if you saw the game. Last game, we were all terrified for a good minute that Caicedo completely destroyed his knee and did his ACL and everything. Now, and imagine in theory that happens on February 2nd, and you're like, now what? You know what? Now what for the rest of the season?
Yeah. I can only imagine they're just looking at the situation where Fernandes soon to come back, Lavia unknown return, right? But like maybe the Lavia injury isn't that bad, and they think we can ride this out. We've got the depth to ride this out, and it's not worth triggering like that loan, unless from what we've kind of seen from at least lots of rumors, it's like maybe they'll use it as a swap deal or something like that. But yeah, to be fair, I don't. From looking at Spurs a lot this season, that's an injury crisis, and Chelsea aren't near that yet. So
no. We just have certain areas where we're really light.
Yeah, but to be fair, like so does every team, right? And it's
no, of course, obviously,
yeah.
But
these injuries,
most teams don't have the pressure to perform and be successful as we do, because most teams haven't spent 1.4 billion. And after you've spent 1.4 billion, you shouldn't have light areas in your squad, because what have you spent 1.4 billion on then? You know, that's kind of the problem.
I mean, it's only like right now because 2 of your first team players are injured, and 2 is quite a lot, right? Like it's more likely than unlikely that this is as bad as your midfield situation gets, and in a couple of months, then maybe you only got 1 injury or no injuries, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we're fine. What's the problem?
Yeah, maybe it's just obviously we had bad injury crisis the last 2 seasons, and obviously we have certain players who are just injured so often that we just don't trust in their availability. And that's Reece James. That's also Wesley Fofana. And Romeo Lavia is certainly falling into that category as well. So even though you're saying it's as bad as it gets, I'm basically, when I think ahead, I always assume Lavia injured, you know, because the likelihood is he is injured. So sure, it's nice when he's not, but I can't plan my squad according to him being fit, because he's not fit often enough to plan like that for me. So it's like, you know, it's like, imagine if we didn't have a backup to Reece James, even though we know Reece James is permanently out injured. Like, that would be stupid as well. You know what I mean? Like, is this, if we didn't have Gusto as well, but then you still have Achapong, and then we still spent half the season with Disasi at right back. And that's the situation we put ourselves in by having important members of the squad who are extremely injury prone. It's very tricky for me. It really is. I mean, in the last game, I'm not sure if you noticed, the last 10 minutes of the game, we put Cucurella just full on into midfield, not inverting from left back. He just played the end of the game as a midfielder. Maybe that's part of it. If Reece James's fitness can go, you know, to an acceptable level, maybe he will also be used in the midfield area, not just right centre back. But I think so far they've tried to avoid that to limit his running and hopefully save his hamstrings. But the whole with Cucurella situation is he's our only left back as well. So you can't use him in midfield, because then you don't have a left back. So, and imagine Caicedo and Cucurella got injured, we might as well just turn up to every game with a white flag. Might as well not play anymore, because without those two, we're worse than Potter Chelsea without those two. It's unbelievable how much we depend on them. But yeah,
I don't know, man. I think I still think, like, I look at Spurs and I'm like, they've like, you know, you're still quite a step away from having to, like, I don't know, bring through teenagers. I think if Caicedo and Cucurella got injured, then Maresca would be like, okay, let's just try Gusto as like a defensive midfielder and see if we can make that work. And sounds horrible right now, but he might, as a coach of his level, he might be able to make that work.
But you know what? Because Spurs have been in that situation, is why they're 15th, bro. And Chelsea cannot afford to become 15th. But you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like you're saying it's not as bad as Spurs. I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't want to be fucking 15th either.
But my point with Spurs is, like, they have, for 2 positions, they've got 3 first-team players, whereas Chelsea have got, that's like, what, you know, 1.5 players per position. So Chelsea are a lot stronger than that. It will take a lot more to plunge you guys into a crisis. And as you touched on as well, Maresca's system and the amount of players you've got, like, across the pitch means you should suffer less injuries. You have so far this season. If it's under Pochettino, definitely get you, and that's because he ran players into the ground for, you know, hell's sake. But Maresca seems to have a better hold on that.
He does, and it's a fair point, of course. Like for example, at striker, if Jackson got injured, well, then I'd be very concerned because what will we do? I don't know. Will we play Nkunku? Will we play Felix? Even though we're certainly trying to sell one of the two, I don't know.
You got
I personally
Margui.
think, yeah, I mean, true. I forgot about him. That tells you everything you need to know, really. I like him. He's a great presser and everything. Like if we played football without a ball, he'd probably be our best player after Kaiser. But unfortunately, we play football with the ball, so that's kind of part of the issue. But yeah, there you go. I mean, it's just because Clutch also said it a minute ago in the chat, I personally rate Chilwell. Obviously, we spoke about we don't have another left back. Well, we do. He earns £200,000 a week, and he's still at the club. Has played 5 minutes against Barrow in the Carabao Cup third round in September. Hasn't been used since, even against Morecambe. He didn't get a goodbye last 5 minutes because Maresca said, well, he might leave, so we don't want to risk injury. I'm like, how likely is he to get a move if he's a risk to get injured for playing 5 minutes against a League Two team at 5-0 up? I don't know. But supposedly, according to Matt Law, there's still optimism that we will find a loan move. I mean, again, I'm asking you as an outsider, what do you think of certain treatment of players from Chelsea? Like, is this something that puts you off Chelsea? You're like, I know you obviously as a kid you were a Chelsea fan, but does it put you off Chelsea when you're like, what happened with Chalobah? What happened with Gallagher? Situations like this where you're like, why are you guys doing this? Is that you? Do you think that, or are you so much of a football analyst now that you're like, this is business? Don't even think about it on a personal level.
Yeah, I don't care. It's modern football. it's just how
true,
it works.
It's true.
I think they get paid enough. That's my personal opinion. Is I get told off this by my friends actually. My personal opinion of football in 99% of things is you get paid enough. It's a cold heart business. Sure, sucks. It's not that I don't have empathy, but at the end of the day, I'm just like, this is how it works. I struggle to get worked up over it.
Yeah, and I hear that. I think it's just a combination of, for example, like offer Chalobah a 6-year deal and then banish him from the training ground a year later, and you're like, why'd you offer him a 6-year deal then? Like, what's the whole point? And now you're desperate. Oh shit! All our players are injured or terrible. Let's recall him, man of the match, first game back. And you're like, well, just don't make everything be about pure profit. Don't sign so many unnecessary players for 20 million who we'll never see again. And on that note, players for 20 million who we'll never see again. There's someone who I think is in that category, but you might tell me otherwise. We signed this past week on the 20th, so 3 days ago, Mamadou Sarr. From where did we sign him from again?
Strasbourg.
Oh, yeah. I got confused. I thought we signed him for Strasbourg. No, we signed him from Strasbourg. I was like, hold up. Yeah, there you go. Initially, it was said 20 million. I was like, fuck's sake, 20 million wasted again. It's only 15 million with add-ons. God knows how much is the base fee. Chances are add-ons will never be reached. Like with Mudryk, everybody talks about 100 million. Well, he's open band. We're not hitting any add-ons with that deal, are we? Is he a player you like? Is he a player you rate? Is he a player that you think come the summer could actually be in the squad?
I think in the summer he'll be evaluated by Maresca. I think 15 million is a fair fee from what I've seen of him. So the way I can quickly categorize him, I think defensively, there's a lot to get excited about. He's a very physical player. I think he's really strong in 1v1s, good reading of the game, and just like really good technique in how he manages his body and like the way he blocks defenders.
What is he not good at?
Well, that's what I was about to get to. I think
Very
the thing that Maresca is going to evaluate is his on the ball quality, and that's what I'm a bit worried on. I think his passing in particular is like just a small thing that doesn't get spoken about enough. But I think a good way of telling if a player's a good passer or not is how bumpy their passes are, and that's one of the problems with Sarr. He'll quite often fire passes into players in decent positions, but giving them such a hard pass to control, they can't do much with it. That was the big red note in my stuff on him when I've been watching Strasbourg. Maybe, yeah. And yeah, so when Chelsea signed Sarr, I was a bit like, okay, that's interesting. But I can see why they're attracted to him. I think it's just whether, if you can work on that weakness, you have a really good all-round defender. If not, then I guess you see where you go from there. Maybe he'll be useful in games where you don't have as much of the ball, but judging by the way Maresca's going, that's probably not going to be very often.
No. And, my take is also, like I said earlier, I don't think we'll ever see him at Chelsea. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Strasbourg needed some money for whatever financial rules they have in France. And we're like, okay, we'll buy one of your players, then you don't have financial problems anymore.
I mean,
I don't
maybe
know if that's true, but that's what it feels like to me anyway.
maybe that's the case, but like, I will say with Ugachukwu, for example, like you heard me, I think personal opinion is they're just trying to increase his value to sell him. With Strasbourg, you don't bring in a coach to play the exact same. Like I can't stress it. I'm sure you already spoke. Have you had someone come on talk about Strasbourg on your channel before? Yeah, like you're aware they're playing the exact same way as Chelsea, like the exact setup. So I don't think you put that in place to just like make moves for the sake of it. I think you only do that to bring players in when you think, cool, you're ready to come into the first team and see what we can do with you. Like he has played first team football, so let's not take that away from him. It's just, and he is still really young as well. Maybe this is a player in like 2-3 years. It's like he is a really, really good defender, and you've managed to work on his technique and on-ball quality.
I mean, maybe. I'm not completely ruling it out. And obviously, you have a point that they play the same system as us, which is all well and good. But I think that's more for other players. I don't know. I just think a lot of players are just part of the money-making machine, and then other players are meant to be given chances. And we just have too many. Like, on the one hand, we don't have enough centre-backs. On the other hand, we have too many. Like you spoke about, we've got Anselmino, we've got Josh Achampong, who got 2 Premier League starts at 18 now. And you've got him coming in while Colwill is only 21 himself. So it's like, I don't know.
Yes,
I don't have trust in it. Let me say it that way. But I'm sure he's not a bad player. I mean, in terms of, because you went back to Ugachukwu, the best thing, and I'm not sure if you've heard this, the media briefs that Chelsea throw around about Ugachukwu is they think he can become as good as what's his name? Germany anyway. I forget his first name. And I'm like, it feels a bit racist, no? Like, you can't just say he's going to be as good as Germany just because he's also tall and black. That's not how it works, man. Like, clearly he's not as good as Germany, bro. Have you seen Germany play football, man? I don't know. Do you see what Germany did at Monaco? Aurelien, yeah, that was it. I had an O in my head. I got confused. I mean, what do you think of that when you hear Chelsea comparing him to Germany? Like, I don't know. Is that not just a bit simple?
I don't know. Defensively, Ugachukwu. I don't think defensively Ugachukwu has been like, that's his drawback.
Oh, this is not a dig at Ugachukwu. This is a dig at overestimating how good he may be or underestimating Germany. For me.
Well, that's my point, though. Like, I think, like, you know, I personally think he'll be as good as Germany? No, but I don't think it's like outrageous to be like, oh, defensively he might be that good one day. I don't think that's the problem. I just think it's on the ball stuff that's like, yeah, that's where I think the weakness lies. But how old is he? Still, I'm checking out. He still must be like 21.
He's gotta be 21, I would guess.
He's still only 20 as well, man. Like, again, this is, and it's been very interesting, this conversation.
He turns 21 in 2 months, but yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this conversation where you didn't expect it to be, I was the positive one, you're the negative one. But like, I think the thing to remember with all these players, which I can see why you're detached, they're all so young that, and maybe this is all a big mess, it doesn't work out, but it could very easily turn out in like 5 years. Like, so many world-class players have come through, been signed, maybe been sold, or maybe on loan by, or maybe are at Chelsea, just because of how young all of these players are, and it's really easy to forget that.
No, and that no, 100%, and I'm sure that plays a role for a lot of Chelsea fans. I'm sure that the whole attachment issue, like you grow attached to players over time. We've changed the entire squad in the space of 3 transfer windows, and now we've started to get attached to those new young players. And now we're starting to sell those again and buy new young players. And it's like, now people are getting like, are we just going to permanent? Because there was this idea that we're like, yeah, we're only going to go crazy for the first 2 years and stuff. We're not going to go crazy forever. But now it feels like we might be going crazy forever. And now people are like, no, I don't want this. I don't want 10 new players every summer because it's just long. You can't be, you start forgetting people's names, man. Like, we had Malang Sarr at the club and people were like, who? Like, Pochettino didn't even know who he was. And he was at the fucking club. Like, do you know what I mean? We've just got too many players like this. And we've got players like, you know, Kendrick Payers and Esteban William. Just quickly, what do you think about both of them?
I'm not even bothered to look. I've heard them to be superstars in the making. I'm like, all right, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe I've even heard more than you have. I certainly believe that a bit more about Esteban, but it seems like with Payers, we're going to send him to Strasbourg first before making him come here, which is probably a good move. But Esteban seems to be getting thrown straight in. As soon as he turns 18, he's supposed to turn up and do the business. So let's see how that one goes, I suppose. But yeah, just as a last small thing, and I mean, Alex, you could impress the living daylights out of me, but I very much doubt you've not out of this guy. Chelsea have agreed a deal to sign 2008. Think about that, guys. 2008 born talent Dastan Satpayev from Kazakhstan. Transfer fee worth €4 million package, add-ons included from Kairat Almaty. Probably sorted him out when we was playing Kazakhstan away in the Conference League a few weeks ago. Record transfer for Kazakhstan League as Dastan joined Chelsea on a 5-year deal plus 1-year option when he turns 18. Yeah, I assume you've obviously never heard of him. He's supposedly a striker, even though nothing of Fabrizio's tweet says he's a striker. He's supposedly a striker. So, people complaining that we need a striker. Well, there you go. There you go. There's our striker. And
no idea who he is.
Got for Vegas loan, already well spent.
I was going to say, no idea who he is, but obviously, I'm sure he's a very talented player. It just made me think that Chelsea saw what City have done with Kusanov and gone, well, we can outdo you. We'll buy
we buy someone from Kazakhstan.
No, that's my mistake. Kusanov is Uzbekistan, but that's what it made me think of.
Close enough. It's kind of just amusing. Just as the last question before we round this out, and I know I told you now, and we're already an hour and 20 minutes. So this is the last question. What do you make of Chelsea on the pitch? Now, you were right in the summer where you're like, you think it's going to go well. There'll come a point in the season where they might struggle against low blocks a little bit, and then they'll probably figure it out in the second half of the season again. Is that still what you see coming? And do you think Chelsea will end up being able to get the top 4?
Yeah, I think so. I remain positive. I think you've actually been... I've not watched in the last few games, but from what I've seen, you've been better than I thought you'd actually be. It does seem like, you struggled against a couple of low blocks, but generally have been quite unlucky and still create a ton of chances. And it's not just an accumulation of low XG chances, like a few big chances that have just been missed. And that happens, right? I think like a team,
especially with a young team, right?
Yeah, teams will just go through dips. I still remain pretty confident Chelsea will get top 4. I think that will be either ahead of City or Forest do eventually drop off, although I'm beginning to believe.
That was going to be my next question. Do you think they will drop off now they've signed Encicio as well? Like they're strengthening left, right, and centre.
Yeah, I do. I'm getting behind Forest. They're a fun team to back.
Same.
I mean, it's also like plausible. Top 5 it becomes Champions League.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Almost guaranteed, as far as I know. I think, but
yeah, but they said that last year. To be fair,
they did, but not at Christmas anymore.
But I think, I don't see Newcastle breaking into the top 5, for example. I think they'll have I think 6th is about where they'll get, well, like maybe 5th, but I don't see them getting top 4. So I still remain positive on Chelsea.
There you go. And in general, like you said, you've been, if anything, positively surprised by how well things have gone under Maresca, because I think what people sometimes forget is not only do we have a young and inexperienced team, we also have for a manager, young and inexperienced manager, who's only had 1 season of managerial football, and that wasn't even in the top flight, even though obviously the Championship is arguably closer to top flight than, I don't know, many managers that have been in first divisions of other countries. But in general, still kind of think that has been a good move going for Maresca?
Yeah, it has. I will say, with the caveat, I've been more impressed with Chelsea's squad than Maresca. I do think I want to see more from... I think Chelsea are still too rigid at times in possession. I'd like to see a bit more positional awareness from... This is a topic for another day. I think if you ask me to give you a reason why I think Chelsea will get top 4, my answer is talent, the talent advantage. And Maresca has platformed that well. But at the end of the day, I think it's the talent that's providing the difference. And it's up to Maresca next season probably to implement more ideas in possession and blend that together. I think a good way to sum it up, and I'm kind of taking words like a phrase from John McKenzie here, I think what Maresca has done is made Chelsea the sum of their parts. I think the next step is to make them more of the sum of their parts, and that's how you challenge for titles.
Because that was going to be my next and truly final question. Do you believe that Chelsea have it in them with Maresca to next season challenge for the title? And when I say challenge, I don't actually mean win, but be in a fight until, say, April.
I'm always wary of like a secondary season drop off for managers, so I'd be
especially a manager that's never had a second season before.
Yeah, so I'd be a little wary on the second season, but I think if you can get through the second season and the performances are still strong, then beyond that, then
third season at the latest, yeah. That's, to be honest, I mean, this season in particular until mid-December has gone better than a lot of us expected. So that's why I'm sure this hope from Chelsea fans to challenge has maybe come forward by a season, because I think initially I never expected to be anywhere near challenging the title for at least 3 years, if you asked me at the start of the season. Now I'm like, maybe but they just need to sign the appropriate players in certain positions, in my opinion. If we, like, I don't know this, and I feel it even with you a little bit, where you're like, everybody has this opinion that we have such a stacked squad. I'm like, if you look at our squad a bit closer, it's not as stacked as people think. We're extremely stacked in certain areas. We're like, well, we have 8 goalkeepers, all of them are average. Well, yeah, we have 12 number 10s, yeah, but only one of them is really good. And then the other person that plays number 10 isn't a number 10, which makes having so many other number 10s even more pointless. And then striker, we also only have 1 plus Marquinhos. So it's like, yeah, we have a lot of players, but too many in some positions and not enough in others. So it's like, I hope they figure it out. Alex, I've kept you long enough. Let's round this out. Ladies and gentlemen, please do check out all of Alex's links that I've linked down below. I've linked mainly your Twitter. I know you're not really using your YouTube channel anymore, but hey, if you guys want to check out his YouTube channel, maybe if you all subscribe, he might start making content again. I doubt it, but hey, there's always a chance. Check out, obviously, the TikTok as well. I'm not sure. Do you use the TikTok still?
I do not, but I would say if you want to find like my next video, which will be, like I said, a Chelsea sensible transfer, go and subscribe to The Athletic, and that's where you'll see it.
Exactly. Subscribe to The Athletic. And of course, like I say, the Twitter, recently a very interesting long thread on Benjamin Šeško, especially something that you touched on earlier with Garnacho, almost the opposite, where Šeško always just laces it and Garnacho always uses the inside of his foot. So very interesting thread. So go check that out. Alex, thank you very much for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button on your way out. That would be massively appreciated. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, upwards and onwards, and I will see you next time.